right, everybody, welcome to Studio B. I am your host, Pastor MGH. Thank you again for joining us here on the set. We greatly appreciate your viewership and your fellowship here on the set of Studio B. So thank you to one and all who tune in, subscribe, and to like, comment, and share, and all that you do. Got a lot of stuff going on right now in the world, and so you know what we do here at Studio B. We talk about the modern day issues that are coming across your TV screen, what's happening in your life and in my life, and then we merge those to a biblical belief and saying what does the Word of God say about all of these things that are happening. And there's a lot happening. For the last 3 weeks, I have been going deeper and deeper and deeper into this whole Russia, Ukraine, Eastern Europe turmoil that is happening, that is affecting us in many different ways here in the States and beyond. Make no mistake about it, this is a world issue, not just an American issue, not just a Ukrainian issue or a Russian issue. This is a world issue that affects everybody in some way, shape, or form. So it is important that we keep our eyes about what's going on here in the Ukraine today. On this particular day, they are entering into peace talks. And so there has been a ceasefire in Mariupol to where the leaders from Ukraine and leaders from Russia are supposedly going to Istanbul and negotiating peace talks, whatever that may look like. Our president here in the United States, President Joe Biden, just recently went to Warsaw last week for a summit, and he has made the news. And let me just share this. I've said this before because of what I do professionally and in my calling, that words matter. Words matter because they can tilt the scales one way to the other. There were some things that were said during this speech that caused our allies and even our enemies to take notice. Immediately after that speech, the markets responded because our President Joe Biden got up and said that there needs to be a regime change in Russia, to which now on this current day, on this Tuesday, has walked that back and said that we're not calling for a regime change in Russia. We have to be careful about stuff like this because when you're talking about, in this case, a dictator, which is Vladimir Putin, words can be construed to mean something other than what you thought they would mean. And in cases like this where we have so many different things that are teetering in the balance, we need to be very careful with our words. So here we are in day number 36 of this Russian, Ukrainian, Eastern Europe conflict. To date, we have 5,000 plus civilians and military personnel that have been killed throughout this conflict. That's Russian and Ukrainian in 36 days of conflict. It is getting progressively worse, and I believe that it's going to get even, I was getting ready to say worser. Worser is not a word. It is getting ready to get progressively even more worse as the days and weeks go along. I do not believe that the end to this conflict is anywhere near us. I believe it's going to go well into the summer, even in closely to the end of the year. So what you're seeing in Ukraine right now is a culmination of a lot of different diplomatic failures. I cannot continue to stress again the power that America holds in the world. We hold great influence in the world. Now, it is not my belief that America's way of life is always the right way of life. So to impose American ideals on places that are not America is, from my vantage point, a totalitarian kind of authoritarianism that can have detrimental consequences. So yes, we have a democracy. Yes, we have a place where people are able to speak their minds even if you disagree with them. We have this thing called freedom of speech, freedom of religion. We have all of these freedoms that we enjoy here in America, to which we have grown quite comfortable with. But there is a segment of America that is not very. People push back against certain ideals of America. So when we're pushing the American standard on everybody and say you must do as we do, then a lot of countries push back against that type of thinking because they don't want that. And if you look at what's going on in America, you'll see many different pockets of America that are not very socially acceptable. We've made them socially acceptable, but they are not socially acceptable. So the freedoms in which we enjoy, the freedom in which our forefathers, bled and died for, those freedoms have given us a certain way of life here in America, and it's good for America, but not necessarily good for the rest of the world. And so to push that on other people to say, well, this is how we do it in America, you need to do it the same. I see this all the time when I go on mission trips around the world. People look at America because we got big, tall buildings and we live in palatial houses and we got all of this stuff at our disposal. And they look at America as though America, whatever the Americans say, that is what we must go with. And I oftentimes push back against that. Listen, that's not something that you should duplicate in your particular country. That's not good in our country. It's just acceptable in our country, but it's not necessarily good for our country. Don't duplicate that here. All right, so I push back against that a lot because oftentimes what people say is, well, if America is doing it, then it makes it okay. That is absolutely not the case. This is what you see going on right now in Ukraine. And America is getting closer and closer and closer to putting troops on the ground in Ukraine. And I'm going to continue to say it because it needs to be said. When that happens, all hell's going to break loose. The minute one American soldier puts his foot on Ukraine, flies in Ukrainian airspace, it's going to usher in something that we are not prepared for. During his recent address to in Warsaw, President Biden said, the United States of America will take a more active role in this conflict happening in Ukraine. 2 days later, he said, we are just observers on the world scene and will act accordingly. Because that statement that we will take a more aggressive role in what's happening in Ukraine, anybody that heard that understood what that meant. Our allies, our enemies, and everybody that's paying attention to us understood what that meant if we're going to take a more active role in Ukraine. What does a more active role in Ukraine look like in a military conflict? It's military personnel. And that's just not good for America. It is not good for America. It's not good for American troops to be dying in the country over something that has absolutely nothing to do with us. It's amazing to me that we continually do the same things that we know now were just not the right things to do. We knew we should have never went into Vietnam. We got into Vietnam. We stayed in there years longer than what we actually should. We never should have been there in the first place. But that's a whole nother story. We got Vietnam to look at. We got the Iraq war that we can look at. We got wars that killed American personnel that we are now able to look back through the channels of history and say, you know what, we should have never been there. We should have never sent our troops there. But amazingly, we keep doing the same things over and over and over again, which is what we're getting ready to do in Ukraine. This is exactly what we're getting ready to do in Ukraine. And when that happens, the linchpin of everybody keep talking about WW3, World War III. I have been very, very careful not to say that. But the linchpin for WW3 will be taken out as soon as America gets directly involved in military conflict. It's going to excite something that we're not prepared for. If America gets involved, 29 other countries in NATO get involved. 29 other countries, 3 of them being nuclear powers, get involved in this conflict that's happening in Ukraine. Well, what's that going to do to Vladimir Putin? It's going to force his hand. It's going to take us to a place to where we're not prepared to go. Diplomatic options in this case will definitely work. In some conflicts, 9/11 to be exact, diplomatic solutions didn't necessarily work. But in this case, diplomatic solutions absolutely can work. So I'm not a warmonger, everybody. I'm not calling for war. I don't believe that America should be involved in a war. I don't believe that America should be sending American military personnel halfway around the world to fight in a country in a conflict that has absolutely nothing to do with us, that has not violated any of its treaties with any of its allies. So we need to keep our noses out of that particular area. But one thing that I find very interesting when I was, doing some research, y'all remember when COVID-19 was ravaging our nation, especially in the summer months of 2020 and beyond, where it was ravaging our nation, where businesses were shutting down, people were being laid off. I mean, it looked like ghost towns in a lot of major cities. COVID-19 was absolutely decimating our economy. It took 6 months to get a COVID relief bill through Congress to help struggling Americans who had been ravaged through COVID-19. 6 months of back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Put this in, take this out, put this in, take that out. 6 months of wrangling by our Congress and our House of Representatives to help struggling Americans. Everybody, it took 8 hours for our U.S. Congress to authorize $13 billion of humanitarian aid to the people of Ukraine. It took 6 months to get struggling Americans help who were losing jobs, who were getting homes foreclosed on, getting cars repossessed, and whose lives have been turned upside down by COVID-19. And everybody knows the effects of COVID-19 and what it did to the American economy and to the American family. It took 6 months for those relief bills to get through Congress. 6 months. It took 8 hours for the Congress and the House of Representatives and to be signed for $13 billion to go to Ukraine. 6 months for American people, 8 hours for the Ukrainian people. When you're starting to look at all of this stuff, and I've always told you this, you need to remember this. I told the men last night, war is a money-making machine. War is a money-making machine. There are people that propagate war. Many of us that are on the ground level of life that are just trying to do the best we can, go to work, take care of our kids, take care of our families, make sure we got a roof over our head. We don't think at those levels. We don't think at those levels that there are people that are really interested in global domination and a new world order. There really are people like that. I know you seen it on movies, and I know you will chalk it up to conspiracy theories, but there really are people who are interested and who are advocating world domination. There are literally people that believe that there's too many people on the earth. We got to get some of these people off the earth, because the more people that we have on earth, the less life that we have on earth. There are people that are really out there like that. And I know the average person, the middle class person, the person that's just trying to do their best don't understand that, but there are greater stakes at hand when you're talking about this. That's why we don't need to play about it. You don't need to play about this thing that's going on in Ukraine. I get it, everybody. I am compassionate. I really am. I am compassionate. I believe that, people's homes being bombed and people being pushed out on the streets, I believe that is a horrible thing. I believe that we should step in a humanitarian way to do what we can to try to subside some of these things that people are going through no fault of their own, the average citizens of Ukraine. But unfortunately, the problem is that we have people in power who are making decisions, and their decisions affect other people, right? And so I believe that we should be sending humanitarian aid, and we should be trying to use diplomatic responses in order to subside these things that are going on halfway around the world. But on the other side of that, you see that even though we're not now in a quote unquote war, what it's doing to America right here stateside, just imagine if it got escalated and we actually put troops on the ground. Imagine what's going to happen in America, in these United States, to your family, to my family, to your way of life, my way of life, your job, my job, when we actually do get involved in an active war. And wars are messy. And if you are a student of history and you go back to the wars in which has been fought on the soil of America, and we just talk about the Civil War, a war that was fought on the soil of America. Since the Civil War, we had the Revolutionary War and things of that nature, but World War I, World War II, those wars were not fought within the continental U.S. No, those wars were fought in other countries. Like, we haven't had a war here since the Revolutionary War, since the Civil War, like war within the confines of our nation. We've been blessed by that, mainly because America has developed itself as a superpower with one hell of a military. Make no mistake about it, America fights with a really big stick. We got a military that makes people think before they want to try to invade our borders, especially in a military conflict, because America can fight back very, very well with its military. And that military response and preparedness has kept us from fighting wars on our soil. But it's different with this one. It's different because now we're dealing with nuclear capabilities. Now we're dealing with biological capabilities, chemical capabilities. It's different. It's not about pulling a Russian destroyer up to the port of Galveston and 2,000 plus military personnel jump off and come through Galveston up through Houston and start fighting on U.S. soil. No, that's not going to happen like that. But a nuclear response in an escalating war is definitely on the table. Watch this. President Biden said this: if Vladimir Putin responds with a nuclear or chemical weapon, he will be met with an in-kind response. President Joe Biden said that on Thursday. That if Putin responds with a biological or chemical weapon, he will be response with measures in kind. What does that mean? That means chemical and nuclear weapons. Everybody grab a history book. Google Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Google it. See what's happening with the soil in Hiroshima and Nagasaki 60 plus years after a nuclear bomb was dropped there. An atomic bomb. Nothing is growing in the soil. In almost a 55 square mile radius, not a single blade of grass grows in that area. Wiped out tens of thousands of people with one atomic bomb that fell from a plane. We're in 2022. We're not dropping bombs from planes now. These are missiles. Nuclear arms are put on the tips of missiles and shot across oceans. North Korea has been testing nuclear missiles with the capability of getting to American shores for years. We're now in a nuclear age. And the nuclear deterrent has been talked about so much more in the last 3 months because of an escalating crisis in Ukraine. So this thing is teetering to such a degree to where it's not just about right or wrong anymore in my eyes. There's this old saying that cooler heads shall prevail. I get that. But cooler heads don't necessarily always prevail. Mark Twain said something. He said, "It is easier to fool people than to convince them that they're being fooled." Hitler said this, that the greater the lie, the more people are apt to believe it. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said this, that in order for evil to prosper, good men just need to do nothing. I want you to think about what Mark Twain said. He said it's easier to fool somebody than to convince them that they're being fooled. Because most people, unfortunately, even in an age of technology where you can find information to educate yourself, most people don't want to do the work in order to make themselves better. So they just believe what their eyes tell them, what their ears hear. They just believe it. So it's easier to fool people than to convince them that they're being fooled, that we are pawns in the system. And unless we stand up and make our voices known, then we will continue to be the pawns in the system. You have people right now that are playing with people's lives. And that's just not cool. That's not cool for political game. That's not cool for, world domination and all of the rest that comes along down the pipe. This is what's going on right now. Why every time that you turn on the news, you hear about Ukraine? COVID-19 is gone. There's no more talk about COVID-19 on CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, or the rest. There's a blurb here and there. It is no longer dominating the news cycle. To a disease that took 5+ million people off the planet. Now, every station that you turn on, the news anchors are wearing Ukrainian flags on their lapels. We're now gathering supplies and standing in support, which is all fine and good. It's dominating the news cycles. But I told you last week, some of this stuff is just not making sense. Why now? Why now? And so as you're looking at what's going on in Ukraine, I'm asking that you would keep your eyes on it, but please hear me. I want to make sure I look into the camera on this. Please hear me. Do your research. Everybody, this stuff just don't make sense. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for Ukraine to have all of this stuff happening right now when all of this could have been avoided. And that's not a general statement. That is a legitimate statement that this could have been avoided. So I want you to keep your eyes on Ukraine, and I want you to pray, those who are believers, those who believe in the power of prayer, that God will send a spirit of peace. I believe that God is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we may be able to ask and or think. So keep your eyes on Ukraine. I told you that my cousin just got recently, my second cousin just got recently, not recently, but I think the end of January, if I'm not mistaken, he got sent to Romania. So, of course, Romania is part of NATO, and he got sent there in, I'm not going to say preparation, but a large unit. I think it was about 1,500 of them. They got shipped to Romania. He's in Romania right now, locked and loaded, I'm assuming, in this bordering NATO country with American troops in these NATO countries that surround Ukraine. Every last one of our NATO allies we have sent troops to. And again, why are we sending troops to our NATO allies? Well, for what reason? Vladimir Putin hasn't done anything to NATO. Hasn't attacked not one NATO country at all. So why then are we sending troops to our NATO alliances? As if the NATO alliances are in some type of dire trouble. It is because We want this, and I believe it is detrimental. I want to go to a little bit of a lighter note here. I want to go to a little bit of a lighter note. I was watching Greyhound. Yeah, was it Greyhound? Yeah, Greyhound, which is a movie with Tom Hanks, and it is set in World War I, where Tom Hanks is he's the captain of a Navy ship called the Greyhound Destroyer, and it is when, America and its allies are sending troops to Great Britain during World War I. And so his particular ship is protecting all of the U.S. envoys that are bringing supplies and soldiers across the Atlantic. And as I was watching that movie, I started getting all of these beings from my family members on our family thread. And let me pull up one of them. One of them says, "What in the world just happened?" And then it's got a picture of Will Smith slapping Chris Rock. Now, I didn't even know that the Oscars were on that night. I had no idea. And the Oscars are just whatever. But I didn't even know they were on. So here comes Will Smith, apparently from a joke that Chris Rock had told about his wife Jada. Said that the next G.I. Jane Part 2, I think it was the joke that he said, in reference to Demi Moore and her playing this Marine who had shaved her head in G.I. Jane. And Jada Pinkett suffers from, how do you say it, alopecia? Alopecia, which is a condition of hair loss. Now, just like anything, when something like that happens, I'll start to research it and do all. I found out that quite a number of people suffer from it, but it is not a congenital condition. So I found out actually that a friend of mine, not a friend, but an acquaintance of mine, suffered from alopecia as well. And so alopecia is when large clumps of your hair begin to start to fall out. And this friend of mine told me that it was a diagnosis of stress. And interestingly enough, first time that he had got alopecia was during the 2020 COVID-19, all that stuff that was going on in COVID-19. And he said, yeah, pals, he said, I was, stressed out. I had this going on, that going on. And he said in the middle of the night when I would, put my hand through my head, I would have large clumps of hair in my head. Now, he has since recovered. He did plasma treatment from his blood. They would extract blood from his system, spin it into some type of contraption, he said, to extract the platelets out of his blood and then inject those into his head, into the hair follicles. And so he has since recovered from alopecia and got a full head of hair now. But Jada has been on her Red Table Talk, I think that's what it's called. She has talked about it, talked about our issues with alopecia. And so here it is that Chris Rock is making a joke, and Will Smith doesn't take too kindly to the joke, gets up and walks up to Chris Rock and slaps him into next week, slaps him into the future, and then walks back to his seat, calmly sits back down, and then begins to verbally tirade Chris Rock, all doing a live show or taping of the Oscars. So I'm gonna give you my take on this. I've talked to a couple of people about this, and well, Pastor Holman, what do you think about it? What do you think about it? Okay, so initially I was like, okay, is he standing up for his wife? I said, you know what, that's cool. He stood up for his wife. That's cool. I appreciate that. A man is honoring his wife. But then I began to start to, dig behind the weeds and really begin to start thinking about some stuff that's on the backdrop that you typically didn't see. Now just give me a minute. For the last 10 plus years, we have been living in an environment to where the disrespect of men have just been at an all-time high. We got this thing called toxic masculinity. We got gender dysphoria. We got people jumping out of sexes into other sexes. We have been living in a world right now where disrespect of men have not only been tolerated, but it has been encouraged. The disrespect of a man. I come out on the side that you never disrespect a man. You don't disrespect people, period. But you never disrespect a man. You never disrespect a man. I just believe that there are ways in which we can amicably communicate and resolve things without disrespect coming into the picture. As I began to start thinking about this and what went on, and you know, the sharp divide of some people who are on Will's side and some people are on Chris Rock's side. Okay, some people say Will was in the wrong. Some people say Chris Rock was in the wrong, okay? So you got people falling on both sides. So here's my take on it. One, and I believe this to the core of my being, everybody. I believe that the man is ultimately the protector of the home. God first, then the man. But I believe if you protect your wife at home, she's protected in public. If you do a good job of making sure that your wife is protected, she's protected everywhere. When the standard is the standard, everybody that knows you and even those who don't know you know what it is. So when you do a good job as a husband protecting your wife, then everybody knows that that's what the deal is. Okay, so when you do a good job protecting her at home, she's protected in public. But when you don't do a good job protecting her at home, then she's not protected in public. My problem with the whole Will Smith and Chris Rock thing, and I'm only addressing this one for twofold. One, I want to give you a perspective that I believe is happening in our world right now, and that it's going to continue to perpetuate itself. The Oscars are a organization that gives awards to movies that portray violent images, sexual innuendos, and the like. Then we get mad when the violence that is now just been awarded at the Oscars is now perpetrated in real life. But that's something that we celebrate and give a gold statue to somebody who just acted in a movie that is portraying violence. But then when violence happens in real life, we now condemn that violence. It is a duplicitous stance. It is a hypocritical stance. When you're looking at Will Smith and what he did, was he right in trying to protect the honor of his wife? You can fall out on whatever side that you want to fall out on, okay? Ultimately, these are two millionaires, Will being a millionaire, Chris Rock being a millionaire. These are millionaire problems that I know nothing about, okay? So ultimately, I'm not going to put a whole lot of time, energy, and effort into two millionaires fighting against each other. But what this says is twofold. One, if you're fighting for the honor of your wife, then fight for the honor of your wife. That's fine. The problem that I have with this is the hypocritical stance. See, my issue is always hypocrite. My issue is, if you're going to be a way, be that way. Be 100 about it. Just be 100 about it. Who cares about what people say about you? Just be 100 about it. If that's what you believe, stand on it and ride it all the way to glory. But just don't be hypocritical in it. Don't be this way on Monday and then this way on Tuesday. Just be consistent in what you believe. I think when consistency happens, nobody has a problem with it. So now, Will, you're protecting the honor of your wife at the Oscars, but yet you got on the Red Table Talk and talked about you and Jada having open marriage. You guys kind of trade each other back and forth. The entanglement issue, the word entanglement that came up a couple years ago with Augustine, a 20-something, early 30-something friend of your son Jaden. You had sexual relations with this man. And so if you're protecting the honor of your wife, praise God for that. But how can you protect the honor of your wife when Chris Rock did a simple joke? Now, Jada was in all green, and she had a bald head. It was, as I've looked at the video, not anything that I thought was intentional or detrimental to her character or making fun of, alopecia and all that she had. I don't even know, many don't even know if Chris Rock even knew about it. And, Chris Rock is a comedian. I've been to comedy shows where I have personally been roasted. Like, that's what comedians do. Comedians bring that fire. And a good comedian ain't nobody off limits. Like, it's just what comedians do. Comedians, hold to this First Amendment. Comedians are the bleed valve to society. They bring, a little bit of relief in very, very stressful times, right? And so he's a comedian. And if you know Chris Rock, that's Chris Rock. Like, what he did, like, that's what he always does. He wasn't doing anything different. That's who he always was. Okay, so you take that, you get up, and you go and publicly degrade a man in such a way. Now, I want you to hear this. He didn't punch Chris Rock. He slapped him. A slap is an ultimate insult. An ultimate insult. When somebody wants to give you that business, this is what they say, man, I'm about to slap the blankety blank out of you. Open hand slap. A slap is the ultimate sign of disrespect. He open hand slaps this man, turns around, walks back to his chair, and then begins to cuss him out. Keep my wife's blankety blank name out of your mouth. Here's my question to Will Smith. Where was that energy with August? When August was sleeping with your wife? Where was that energy with all this other stuff that is going on? Where is that energy when Jada called you horrible in bed? Where was all that energy? There was no energy then. There was no protecting of my wife's honor then. But now all of a sudden, you do this. And you did this because this environment that we have created that you can disrespect men in that way is prevalent now in our culture. It's prevalent now in our culture where men are just disrespected. And they're just disrespected for no other reason than to be disrespected. Then on top of that, this is before you get the award. Then you get the award for Best Actor in King Richard, which is a fabulous movie, by the way. Will Smith deserved Best Actor. He did a phenomenal job in the movie. Phenomenal. I was quite impressed when I watched it a few weeks back. Great movie. And would highly recommend it. King Richard talking about Venus and Serena's father, as he did an excellent job as a father to keep his children out of gang life in Compton and ultimately get them to the world stage of being tennis champions. Excellent film. But this happened before you were given the award. You get the award, and then you stand up and say that God is using you to spread peace and love throughout the world. You apologize to the Academy. You apologize to your fellow nominees, but you make no public apology to Chris Rock. And then you say that God is using you to spread peace and love. My question is, what God? What God is using you? Then you go to the Vanity Fair Awards, the Vanity Fair party right after the Oscar. You and Jada and all of your little crew are dancing and having a good time like nothing ever happened. You completely disrespected a man in such a way that I don't think warrants any man being disrespected. Now, here's the other thing that people are saying. Charlemagne the God said this on his show yesterday. It was us. Now, you remember 4, 5, 6 years ago, it was boycott the Oscars because there's not a lot of black representation at the Oscars. And so all these big movie stars said, I'm not going to the Oscars. I'm going to boycott it because there's not enough black representation at the Oscars. Well, you got black representation this time. You got 2 black men on center stage in tuxedos slapping each other, or one slapping the other, and then verbally barraging him to the degree to where you've already humiliated the man. And now you're cussing the man out like he's a 2-year-old boy. Now, kudos to Chris Rock. Because let me tell you, I love the Lord. I do. I love the Lord. And God has heard my cry. But Will Smith would have got that work. You ain't finna pimp slap me and then go sit down. Oh, no. Oh, no. You about to get that work, Will. You wanted it? Here you go. So shout out to Chris Rock, who stayed in character, who gathered himself, composed himself. You can tell he was a bit frazzled, but he gathered himself and got through that little segment. Shout out to you, my man. And then he declined to press, charges. Shout out to you, my man, because let me tell you, shout out to you. Because I come from an era where wherever the disrespect happens, that's where the disrespect is handled. You with your mom in the grocery store and you act a fool in aisle 6, guess what mama do in aisle 6? She take care of the business in aisle 6. She don't take care of it when he get home. But the fact that you have the audacity to walk up there and just pimp slap this man for telling the joke. Now, Will Smith is a comedian. So anybody that knows these two guys knows that they make their living off of making people laugh. Now, Will has gotten some more serious characters toward the later end of his years, but he's made a career off of making people laugh. And so now here it is, you take this opportunity to go up there and slap this man into next week because you figured that he crossed the line by talking about your wife. Now, your wife has talked about alopecia on her Red Table Talk. She's been public about it. Matter of fact, a clip that I have here that I found yesterday, her mom, and I think her name is Willow, whatever the daughter's name is, I think it's Willow. They sit around a little table talk talking about the alopecia. And Jada says, you know what? I've got to learn to laugh at myself because I got to shave my head off. I got to learn to laugh. This is what she said about her own self. But now when Chris Rock says it, you get all of a sudden hysterical and go up there and disrespect a man. I think the greater lesson to this is, everybody, we are creating a culture where disrespect is normal. That's dangerous. We're creating a culture to where you can disrespect people at a whim, and nobody cares. Nobody says anything about it. Well, let me tell you something. You can't do that to everybody, because I can guarantee you this: Will Smith would have never did that to a white man. If Dwayne Rock Johnson was up there doing those award shows, Will Smith would have never walked up to Dwayne Rock Johnson and did that. He'd have never done that. And then to go back down and verbally assault this man after you physically assaulted him, how is that even remotely right? The greater issue is the respect of men that I've talked about a lot of times here on this set. Respect is supposed to be the norm. Me and you don't have to agree politically. Me and you don't have to agree socially. Me and you don't have to agree on a lot of different stuff. But if respect is not there, if respect is not at the foundation, me and you're going to have a hard time getting along. I have people that I don't agree with and people that don't agree with me that are in my circle. Praise God for them. And, sometimes I say some crazy stuff. Sometimes they say some crazy stuff. But I'm never going to disrespect that person, because I believe at the core of every person, respect is not earned, respect is given. Respect is something that is just given because you're human. Now, if that would have been somebody else and Will Smith would have got that work right there on that stage in a live setting, it would have been a whole different story. I think it was out of line. I think it was uncalled for. I think Will Smith could have done, because I want you to think about this. He not only tarnished his first Oscar, because he's going to forever be known for that moment, but he also tarnished the legacy of Richard Williams, the man that he portrayed in the movie. Venus and Serena were at the Oscars. They were at the Oscars. He's getting an Oscar for playing their dad. This is what precedes you getting the Academy Award for portraying their dad. 5 minutes before slapping a man and then cussing a man out, and then going up there talking to him, crying crocodile tears, talking about God is using you to spread love and peace. But this hypocrisy has been and is becoming the fabric of our land. People are able to say one thing and do something else, and nobody says anything. And here's the rule that I live by: believe nothing they say and everything they do. Believe nothing they say, but everything they do. That's my personal rule. I believe nothing they say, but I trust everything they do. But we're living now in a world to where people can just kind of be willy-nilly. 1 minute I'm up, next minute I'm down. 1 minute I say this, next minute I say that. And the world needs consistency. Consistency matters. Now, Will has since issued an apology. Will Smith has 60 million followers on Instagram. 60. Chris Rock has 5.5, I think. He issued an apology on Instagram to a man that he totally disrespected a couple days before. And this is accepted in our culture. And we hang our head in this, but I want you to listen to the music that we're listening to. Our music is filled with violence. Our shows are filled with violence. Disrespect is at an all-time high. This is the time and the era in which we're living in. And I don't believe personally that, I believe that this is something that we need to auto-correct. So I was asked about my thoughts about Will Smith. I said a joke yesterday in a staff meeting. It was just a joke. I won't say it again. But everybody, I know sometimes, I seem like a naive person when I say things of the Bible, because I believe it. Because I gotta say what I say about the Bible and then look at the world that we're living in, and sometimes it doesn't match up. But I believe these principles work because I believe that God's word works. Respect all people. Men, if you want to protect your wives at home. Make her feel comfortable at home. Let her know that you are the priest, provider, and protector. Everybody around you will know that. Everybody around you will know that. You ain't got to beat your chest. Keep my wife's name out your mouth. To try to make you seem all big and bad when you've allowed your wife to be disrespected in her own home. Might want to think about that, Will. So, lastly, this is only going to be about 50 minutes. I got 3 minutes. Let me tell you, I just got back from Belize. Team of 13 just got back from Belize week before last. We got another team of all men going out in 2 weeks. Man, let me tell you, God is still doing what God does on missions. Those mission trips are absolutely amazing. That makes 110 trips to now 31 different countries all around the world, and I have been extremely blessed. I'm getting ready to pivot right now in my calling and what a lot of things that God has called for me to do. Doors are opening up tremendously. Some things that I've accepted here, some opportunities and positions that I've accepted that are going to give us a greater platform. Studio B has some excellent things going up. We just finalized, and I'm finalizing some partnerships with Studio B and some other podcasts that are happening around, some very popular podcasts. And so things are working to our favor. So all of those who have subscribed and those who watch every day, every episode, thank you so much. It is greatly appreciated. And as our pastor continually is always saying, I will say to you, the best is yet to come, or the best is yet to be. The best is yet to be. Eyes have not seen, ears have not heard the wonderful things that God has planned for those who love him. Always remember this: do your work, keep your head down, God does the rest. Stay off the radar and watch God move. Everybody, we love you. Thank you for joining us here on the set of Studio B. We'll see you next week.